You make a deal to survive the winter. That's all it was supposed to be. A simple arrangement to keep the snow and the wolves from my door. I'd give the man a clean house and a warm meal, and he'd give me shelter. In the spring, we'd shake hands and I'd be on my way. A business transaction. But out here on the frontier, things are never that simple. Because I didn't know about his daughter. A 10-year-old girl with eyes full of barbed wire and a heart full of ghosts. And I sure as hell didn't know about the secret he was keeping buried out past the tree line. The one that explained everything. The one that would change all of our lives forever. My story doesn't start with him, though. It starts with another man, a better man maybe, a man named Thomas, my husband. We'd come from Boston with a wagon full of dreams and the Homestead Act in our pocket. 160 acres of Montana soil, free and clear. Thomas was a dreamer. He saw a 2-story house with a wraparound porch. He saw apple trees and a creek full of trout. I saw a horizon so big and empty, it could swallow you whole. He'd been a bank clerk, you see. Good with numbers, not so good with calluses. He thought farming would be an adventure. I had my doubts. But I loved him, and I was carrying his child, a tiny secret nestled deep inside me. So I smiled and nodded and tried to picture those apple trees. Then we saw the stallion. It was black as a Bible cover, a creature of pure, untamed freedom. It thundered across the prairie like a storm on legs. And Thomas saw another dream to chase. He whooped, grabbing his rope, his eyes shining with a dangerous light. "Thomas, no!" I screamed, but he was already gone, spurring his tired mare into a desperate gallop. He was chasing a legend. He was chasing his own death. I watched him ride. I watched the rope spin. I watched the magnificent black horse swerve with the grace of a dancer. Thomas's mare couldn't make the turn. I saw him fly. I saw him sail through the air for one long, silent moment. And then I heard the sound. A wet, final thud that cracked the silence of the prairie. A sound that ended our plans, our future, and my belief in a kind God. By the time I reached him, his eyes were already fixed on the sky, talking to angels. I buried him myself. 3 days of digging in the hard-packed earth, my hands raw and bleeding. I piled stones on his grave, a pathetic little monument to a life cut short by a beautiful, terrible dream. I was alone, utterly and completely alone. The nearest town, Copper Falls, was a 40-mile ride I couldn't make. The wagon train that brought us here wouldn't be back until spring, if it even survived the journey back east. I had $17, a broken wagon, and a baby growing inside me that didn't care about my predicament. Winter was coming. I could feel it in the air, a cold, sharp promise of what was to come. I was 35 years old, a widow in a land that had no place for widows. I was going to die out here. It was that simple. And then he appeared. He walked out of the dust like a ghost, tall and broad-shouldered, with a face that looked like it had been carved from the unforgiving Montana rock. He took off his hat, revealing dark hair and eyes the color of a stormy sky. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low and rough, "I'm Clint Maddox, your nearest neighbor. I'm sorry for your loss." I just nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. "I don't mean to intrude on your mourning," he continued, his gaze direct and unnerving, "but the old-timers say this winter's going to be a bad one. You'll need food, shelter. You won't survive it out here alone." I stared at him, my mind racing. What did this man want? Charity? I wouldn't take it. "This ain't charity," he said, as if reading my mind. "It's a proposal, a business arrangement." The silence stretched out between us, broken only by the wind whistling over my husband's grave. "I'm a widower," he said, his jaw tightening slightly. "Got a daughter, Elsie. She's 10. Lost her mother 3 years back. She's wild. Needs a woman's touch. And I need a housekeeper. Someone to see to the meals and the mending through the winter." He took a breath, and then he laid his cards on the table. "Marry me," he said, the words hanging in the air like frozen smoke. "Just for the winter, you'll have a roof over your head, a warm fire, and food on the table. My daughter will have a woman in the house. Come spring, when the thaw comes, I'll give you $100 and pay your passage back to Boston. We go our separate ways. No strings." Marry a complete stranger, A man who looked like he wrestled bears for fun? It was insane. It was unthinkable. It was my only option. What about your daughter? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. What does she think of this arrangement? A muscle flickered in his jaw. Elsie thinks what I tell her to think. That was the first lie he ever told me, and we were both about to find out just how big of a lie it was. His homestead was sturdy, a solid log cabin with a stone chimney, puffing out a welcoming curl of smoke. It looked like a safe harbor in a cruel, indifferent sea. But standing on the porch was a storm all its own. A little girl with her father's dark hair and eyes as green and sharp as broken glass. Her arms were crossed, her chin was out, and she looked at me like I was something she'd just scraped off the bottom of her boot. This was Elsie. Pa says you're going to marry him, she said. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. That's the arrangement, I replied, trying to sound braver than I felt. Says you're going to be helping around here. I'll do my best. A slow, cruel smile spread across her face. Good. Ma's been gone 3 years. Place needs a woman's touch. She looked me up and down, her gaze lingering on my soft city hands. Hope you're tougher than you look, city lady. And just like that, the battle lines were drawn. I said no the first night. I said no the second. By the third night, the first snowflakes were kissing the high peaks, and the $17 in my pocket felt as thin as paper. I said yes. We were married by a traveling preacher as the sun bled out across the horizon. Elsie was our only witness, her face a thundercloud. There was no love, no tenderness, just a cold, hard contract signed to cheat the winter. Clint was a man of his word. He gave me his bed and moved himself out to the barn, sleeping in the hayloft. He treated me with a distant, formal respect. He was the perfect gentleman. His daughter, however, was a demon. Elsie Maddox declared war from the moment I set foot in her house. She saw my city softness as a personal insult, my lack of frontier skills as a weakness to be exploited with military precision. My first attempt at making biscuits produced charred, rock-hard lumps of coal. Elsie ate 3 of them without wincing, her eyes glinting. Ma's biscuits were light as a prayer, she said sweetly, wiping crumbs from her mouth. But she was raised on a farm, knew what she was doing. Every task was a new humiliation. Milking the cow, a beast named Gertrude, was a nightmare. The cow seemed to be in league with the girl, kicking over the pail, swatting me with her tail, and refusing to give more than a trickle of milk. Churning butter ended with more of it on the walls than in the churn. The chickens, scattered like an invading army, was upon them whenever I tried to collect their eggs. I was failing, and Elsie was there for every single failure, a silent, smirking judge. But her true masterpiece, the moment I knew this wasn't just childish mischief, came about a month into our arrangement. I woke up to a noise in the kitchen. I crept out of bed, my heart pounding, thinking it was a bear or a wolf. It was worse. A skunk. A big fat skunk was on the kitchen table, casually feasting on the leftover cornbread. I didn't even think. I just screamed, a high, thin shriek that shattered the morning quiet. I fled the cabin in my nightgown, my bare feet hitting the frozen dirt. It felt like I was running on hot coals. Clint came sprinting from the barn, his rifle in his hands, his face a mask of alarm. He saw me hopping from foot to foot, then saw the skunk waddle calmly out the front door as if it owned the place. How did it get in? I stammered, my teeth chattering from cold and shock. And then Elsie appeared on the porch, a perfect picture of wide-eyed innocence. Golly, I don't know, she said, her voice dripping with fake concern. Door must have been left open. Good thing it didn't spray. Ma always said a skunk only sprays when it feels threatened. She looked from me to her father, and in that fleeting glance I saw it all. The conspiracy, the sheer, calculated malice. Clint's face hardened. He knew. He knew exactly who had left that door open, and probably who had left a trail of cornbread leading right to it. But he said nothing. He just looked at me, then at his daughter, and a silent understanding passed between them, an understanding that I was not a part of. That night things escalated. I went to get into bed, pulling back the quilt, and coiled right on my pillow was a snake. A dead one, thankfully, but a snake nonetheless. My scream this time was silent, a gasp of pure terror that stole the air from my lungs. I didn't run to Clint. I didn't give Elsie the satisfaction. I picked up the snake with the fire tongs, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold them steady, and I threw it into the stove. The next morning, Elsie was waiting for me. "Sleep well, city lady?" she asked. That was it. The dam broke. "Enough!" My voice cracked like a bullwhip, a sound so loud and raw it shocked even me. The chickens in the yard stopped scratching. The wind seemed to hold its breath. I have tried to be kind. I have tried to be patient. But I am done being your personal plaything, Elsie Maddox. Elsie's eyes went wide. No one had raised their voice to her in this house for a very, very long time. "I know you miss your mother," I continued, my voice trembling with a month of pent-up frustration and grief. "I know you don't want me here, but your father made a deal, and I am honoring it. I am not your enemy. I am just a woman trying to survive. You can make this winter easy, or you can make it hard, but I swear to you, you will not break me." Tears welled in her green eyes, hot and angry. "You don't know nothing about my ma," she shot back, her voice thick with pain. "You can't cook. You can't milk. You can't even keep a skunk out of the kitchen. You're just, you're just a useless city lady playing house until you can run back to your fancy life." Her words hit me harder than any snake or skunk ever could. Because they were true. I was useless. I was playing a part. And in that moment of raw honesty, something shifted between us. The anger in my chest cooled, replaced by a sudden aching wave of pity for this fierce, broken little girl. And I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight her with anger anymore. I was going to fight her with competence. "You're right," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I can't do most things right out here. But my mother taught me one thing, and today I'm going to prove to you that I'm not entirely useless." The next morning I made an announcement. For dinner, we would be having fried chicken. Elsie laughed, a real mocking laugh. "You?" she scoffed. "You couldn't catch a chicken if it was tied to a post." "We'll see," I said, a grim determination settling over me. What followed was a spectacle. Me, in my city dress, chasing chickens around the yard. They were faster and smarter than any creature had a right to be. Feathers flew. The air was filled with my curses and their indignant squawking. Elsie watched from the porch, her initial smirk slowly fading into a look of grudging respect. It took me nearly an hour, but I finally cornered the plumpest, most arrogant-looking hen against the barn wall. And then came the hard part. The part I had been dreading. I won't describe it, but I did it. My hands shook, and I felt sick to my stomach, but I did what had to be done. 3 hours later, I placed a platter on the dinner table. On it sat a pile of perfectly golden, crispy fried chicken. The smell filled the small cabin, a scent of salt and pepper, and hard-won victory. Clint and Elsie just stared. They looked at the chicken, then at me, then back at the chicken. It was as if I'd performed a magic trick. Clint picked up a piece, took a bite, and his eyes closed for a moment. "Well, I'll be," he murmured. Elsie hesitantly took a drumstick. She chewed slowly, thoughtfully, and then, for the first time, a real, genuine smile touched her lips. "It's good," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "It's real good." It was a truce, a fragile peace offering made of flour and fat. I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could survive this winter together. But that night I learned that peace on the frontier is a fleeting thing. And the secrets this family kept were buried far deeper than I could have imagined. I was tidying up the main room, getting ready for bed, when I noticed Clint's heavy winter coat slung over a chair. It was covered in mud. Thinking to be helpful, I decided to clean it for him. As I brushed it down, my fingers felt something hard and flat in the inner pocket. It was a book, a small leather-bound diary. I knew I shouldn't. It was an invasion of his privacy, a violation of our sterile arrangement. But I couldn't help myself. I opened it. The handwriting was delicate, feminine. It wasn't Clint's diary. It belonged to Sarah, his dead wife. My heart pounded as I read the first entry, dated 4 years earlier. "Clint brought me here today. He calls it our home. I call it the edge of the world. He doesn't see the loneliness. He only sees the land. I pray I am strong enough for this life. I pray I am strong enough for him. I read on, my blood turning to ice. Page after page told a story not of a hardy frontier woman, but of a city girl, just like me. A woman from Philadelphia who was terrified of the silence, who struggled with the chores, who missed her family and the life she'd left behind. She wrote about her frustrations, her failures, her fears. And then I got to the last entries. The girl is strong. Elsie. She has her father's fire, but she watches me. I see the disappointment in her eyes when I burn the bread or fail to mend a shirt properly. I am not the mother she deserves. The final entry was almost illegible, the handwriting shaky. The stallion is back, the black one. Clint says he will break it. He says its spirit is a challenge from God himself. I told him to leave it be. Some things are meant to be wild. He doesn't listen. He never listens. He is going out now. I have a bad feeling, a feeling cold as a grave. The diary ended there. My mind reeled. The stallion. The black stallion that had led to Thomas's death. It wasn't some random act of nature. It was known. It had been here before. And it was somehow tied to the death of Clint's first wife. What happened to her? The diary didn't say. The entry just stopped. Suddenly, Elsie's hostility made a terrible kind of sense. She wasn't just being cruel. She was testing me. She was comparing me to the mother she'd lost, a mother who, in her memory, was probably a perfect, capable frontier woman. But the diary told a different story. Sarah was just like me. And Clint. Clint had watched his first wife struggle and fail in this very house. Was he watching me do the same thing? Was my presence a constant, painful reminder of the woman he'd lost? The business arrangement suddenly felt a lot more complicated. I wasn't just a housekeeper. I was a ghost, living in another woman's house, failing at the same tasks she had failed at, watched over by a man and a daughter haunted by her memory. The next morning, the fragile peace we'd found over fried chicken was gone, replaced by a heavy, unspoken tension. I knew their secret, and they could feel it, even if they didn't know how. A few days later, I found Elsie in the barn crying. She was holding a dress, a simple red calico dress, holding it to her face and sobbing as if her heart was breaking all over again. It was far too big for her. "Is that your mother's?" I asked softly. She nodded, clutching it tighter. "It's all I have left of her that still smells like her." My heart ached for her. I could alter it for you," I offered. "So it fits." "No!" she shrieked, jumping to her feet. "You'll ruin it. You ruin everything." She ran from the barn, leaving the dress in a heap on the hay. I knew I was crossing a line, but looking at that dress, I saw a way to bridge the gap between us, to honor the woman in the diary. That night, by the flickering light of a single candle, I worked. I didn't just alter it. I took the extra fabric and made a small matching bonnet. I used a bit of lace from one of my own chemises to trim the collar. I poured every bit of care and love I possessed into every single stitch. I left the finished dress and bonnet on the end of her bed for her to find in the morning. Her scream woke the entire homestead. It wasn't a scream of joy. It was a scream of pure animal rage. "You cut it! You cut up my ma's dress! You ruined it!" She burst into the main room, holding the altered dress like it was a corpse. Her face was twisted with fury and grief. "I hate you! I wish you'd never come here!" Clint came in from outside, his face dark as a thunderhead. He looked at me, then at his daughter, then at the dress. He didn't have to say a word. His eyes said it all. "You've gone too far." My heart shattered. I had tried to do something good, something kind, and I had only made everything worse. Maybe Elsie was right. Maybe I did ruin everything. I fled the cabin, running blindly out into the cold, the sound of Elsie's sobs chasing me. I ran until my lungs burned, until I couldn't run anymore. I collapsed in the snow near a small cluster of trees. This was it. I couldn't stay here. The arrangement was broken. As soon as the snow cleared enough to travel, I would leave. I would take my chances in Copper Falls. Whatever they might be. It was better than living in a house where I was hated. I sat there for what felt like an hour, the cold seeping into my bones, when I heard a soft crunching sound in the snow behind me. I turned, expecting to see Clint, ready to tell me to pack my things. But it was Elsie. She was wearing the red dress. It fit her perfectly. She had the little bonnet on her head. The red of the fabric made her green eyes shine. She walked toward me slowly, her anger gone, replaced by a raw, fragile vulnerability. She stopped in front of me, twisting a fold of the skirt in her hands. "I'm sorry," she whispered, not looking at me. "I'm sorry I yelled." "It's all right," I said, my voice thick. "I was scared," she admitted, finally meeting my gaze. Tears were frozen on her eyelashes. "I was scared that if I liked what you did, it would mean I was forgetting her." I reached out and took her small cold hand. "Oh, Elsie, your heart is big enough to love your mother and not hate me at the same time. Loving her memory doesn't mean you have to be alone." She looked down at the dress. "It's beautiful. She would have liked the lace." And then she did something that shocked me to my very core. She leaned forward and wrapped her arms around my waist, burying her face in my stomach. A small, tentative hug that felt like a tectonic plate shifting beneath my feet. I held her close, my own tears finally falling, freezing on my cheeks. We stood there for a long time, two grieving souls finding a moment of warmth in the vast, cold wilderness. That Sunday, we went to the small church in Copper Falls. Clint drove the wagon. I sat beside him and Elsie sat between us, wearing her red dress. For the first time, we looked like a family. People stared, of course. The town had been gossiping about the widower Maddox and his strange winter bride for months. But for the first time, I didn't care. I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt since Thomas died. Hope. But hope is a dangerous thing on the frontier. That night I couldn't sleep. The words from Sarah's diary echoed in my mind. "The stallion is back. He is going out now. I have a bad feeling. I had to know. I had to know what happened to her." I pulled on my boots and my coat, slipping out of the cabin as quietly as I could. I didn't have a plan. I just felt a pull, a need to find her final resting place. I saw a faint light flickering in the distance, back in the woods. Clint. He wasn't in the barn. I followed the light, my heart pounding a nervous rhythm against my ribs. The light led me to a small cleared area. There were two graves there. One was a fresh mound of dirt, unmarked. The other was older, with a simple wooden cross. Clint was kneeling in front of the older grave, the lantern light casting long, dancing shadows. He was talking to the grave. "She's a good woman, Sarah," he said, his voice thick with an emotion I'd never heard from him before. "She's kind. Elsie. Elsie's starting to take to her. She even got the girl to wear your dress." He paused and the silence was heavy with unspoken words. "But she ain't you, Sarah. She'll never be you. This was just for the winter, just to get us through. Come spring, she'll be gone. She'll take her money and go back to Boston where she belongs, and it'll be me and Elsie again, just like it should be." Each word was a nail in my heart, just an arrangement, just for the winter, where she belongs. He didn't want me. He could never want me. I was just a placeholder, a temporary fix for his broken life. I backed away, my vision blurred with tears. A sob caught in my throat. I turned and ran, not caring where I was going, just needing to get away. I didn't notice the sky had turned a sickly gray. I didn't notice the wind had picked up, howling through the pines like a hungry wolf. I just ran, and then the snow began to fall. It wasn't a gentle dusting. It was a sudden, violent explosion of white, a blizzard. The world disappeared in a blinding, swirling curtain. One minute I could see the trees. The next, I couldn't see my own hand in front of my face. Panic, cold and sharp, seized me. I had no idea which way the cabin was. I was lost. I stumbled on, calling Clint's name, my voice swallowed by the storm. The cold was a physical thing, a monster with icy teeth sinking into my flesh. I was getting so tired. My legs felt like lead. I knew I had to keep moving, but all I wanted to do was lie down and sleep. I fell, my body too exhausted to go on. I curled into a ball at the base of a large rock. the snow already starting to cover me like a shroud. This is it, I thought. This is how it ends. Just like Thomas, dead and alone in this God-forsaken country. My last thought was of the baby inside me, a child that would never draw its first breath. Back at the cabin, Clint had returned from the graveside to find my bed empty. Panic flared in his chest. He woke Elsie. "Where is she? Did you see where she went?" Elsie, her face pale with fear, shook her head. "No, Pa. She was here when I went to sleep." Clint grabbed his rifle and his heaviest coat. "Stay here. Bar the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." He plunged out into the blizzard, a man walking into the jaws of death. He shouted my name until he was hoarse, his voice ripped away by the wind. The snow was coming down so hard he could barely see, the drifts already up to his knees. He was searching for a needle in a haystack made of ice and fury. He knew he was running out of time. Inside, Elsie was frantic. She paced the small cabin, her heart hammering against her ribs. She couldn't just sit here and do nothing. Her pa was out there. The city lady was out there. She remembered something her ma used to say. In a whiteout, sound is your only landmark. She looked at the pots hanging by the hearth. An idea, desperate and brilliant, sparked in her mind. She unbolted the door and fought her way outside. The wind nearly knocked her off her feet. She scrambled up the ladder to the roof of the cabin, a terrifying climb in the blinding snow. She got to the peak, her small body buffeted by the gale, and she started banging those two pots together. Clang, clang, clang. A steady rhythmic beat, a lighthouse of sound in the heart of the storm. Out in the blizzard, Clint was about to give up hope when he heard it. A faint metallic clang, almost lost in the wind. He stopped listening. There it was again. Clang, clang. It was coming from the direction of the homestead. He turned, using the sound to guide him, a lifeline in the chaos. He found me minutes later, a snow-covered mound at the base of a rock. I was unconscious, my skin deathly pale. He thought he was too late. He swept the snow off me, put his ear to my chest, and heard it, the faint, fluttery beat of my heart. He lifted me into his arms and carried me home, following the relentless clang of Elsie's pots and pans. He stumbled through the door, half frozen himself, and collapsed on the floor with me in his arms. Elsie scrambled down from the roof and bolted the door behind him. Together, the three of us survived the storm. Clint worked over me all night, rubbing my frozen hands and feet, forcing warm broth between my lips. Elsie kept the fire roaring, her face etched with a worry that made her look years older. I woke up sometime before dawn, wrapped in every blanket in the house, lying in front of a blazing fire. I saw Clint asleep in a chair beside me, his face exhausted. I saw Elsie curled up at the foot of the bed, her hand resting on my ankle. They had saved me, this stoic, broken man and his fierce, wild daughter. They had risked their lives for me. And as I lay there listening to the storm rage outside and the steady breathing of the two people inside, I finally admitted the truth to myself. I was in love with him. I was in love with Clint Maddox. And I was starting to love his daughter like she was my own. His words at the grave echoed in my mind. She'll be gone come spring. The deal was still the deal, but my heart had broken the contract. Winter passed. The blizzard was the turning point. After that night, something changed in the cabin. The tension eased, replaced by a quiet, comfortable rhythm. I learned to milk Gertrude without getting kicked. Elsie started helping me in the kitchen, and I started teaching her how to read and write. Clint even started taking his meals in the house instead of the barn. We were becoming a family, a strange, patched-together family, but a family nonetheless. In late February, my time came. The baby decided to make its appearance during another snowstorm, not as bad as the blizzard, but bad enough to make the 40-mile trip to the doctor in Copper Falls impossible. I was terrified. Clint was a rock. "It's all right, Ruby," he said, his voice calm and steady, though I could see the fear in his eyes. "I've done this before." And he had. He delivered my son, his large, rough hands surprisingly gentle, his low voice guiding me through the pain. He had learned how with Elsie, he told me later. Sarah's labor had been long and difficult. I held my son in my arms, a healthy, beautiful baby boy. Thomas's son. "What'll you name him?" Clint asked, his gaze soft as he looked at the tiny infant. Before I could answer, Elsie spoke up from the corner of the room, her voice firm and clear. His name is James Maddox. He's our baby now. Clint looked at me, his eyes asking a question. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. James Maddox, I repeated. It felt right. Spring arrived slowly, then all at once. The snow melted, the creek began to run high, and the first green shoots pushed their way through the muddy soil. The world was coming back to life, and with the spring came the promise of the wagon train and the end of our arrangement. The happiness in our cabin became fragile, tinged with the sadness of my impending departure. We never spoke of it, but it was there, a constant, silent presence. Clint would watch me playing with baby James, a look of profound sorrow on his face. Elsie would cling to me, asking me to read her the same story over and over, as if trying to memorize the sound of my voice. My heart was in a constant state of turmoil. I loved him. I loved this life. I didn't want to go back to Boston. This was my home now. But Clint was an honorable man. A deal was a deal. He would never ask me to stay. He was still bound by the ghost of his wife. I knew I had to be the one to break the silence. But the words wouldn't come. Every time I tried to tell him how I felt, my courage failed me. So I decided to write it down. 2 weeks before the wagon train was due, I poured my heart out onto a piece of paper. I wrote about everything. About how I respected him, how I'd come to care for Elsie, how I'd fallen in love with him and the life we had built. I told him I didn't want the $100 or the ticket back to Boston. All I wanted was to stay, to be his wife for real, to be a mother to his daughter. I folded the letter, my hands trembling. This was everything. My entire future was in this single piece of paper. I didn't know how to give it to him. I was too much of a coward to hand it to him myself. So I devised a plan. I tucked the letter into the pocket of his Good Sunday shirt, the one he kept in the wardrobe for church. The next morning, I saw him getting ready to ride into town for supplies. "Elsie," I said, my heart pounding, "will you do something for me? Your pa forgot his good shirt. Run out to the barn and give it to him before he leaves." "Sure thing, Ruby," she said, grabbing the shirt. I watched from the window as she ran toward the barn, the folded shirt in her hand. My fate was sealed. But fate on the frontier is a fickle, cruel thing. A sudden gust of wind, a rogue blast coming down from the mountains, ripped across the yard. It tore the shirt from Elsie's small hands. The shirt flew through the air, and as it tumbled, the letter, my precious, heartfelt letter, slipped from the pocket. It danced on the wind for a moment, a flash of white against the brown mud, before being swept away, over the fence and into the tall grasses by the creek. Gone. Elsie, not knowing its significance, just picked up the muddy shirt and continued on to the barn. Clint never got the letter. He never knew. The morning the wagon train arrived, the air in the cabin was thick with things unsaid. I kept waiting, praying he would say something. "Don't go. Stay. I need you." But he was silent. He helped me load my trunk onto the wagon, his movements stiff and formal. He stood there holding baby James, his face an unreadable mask of stone. Elsie was clinging to his leg, her face buried in his trousers, her small shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I guess this is goodbye," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I guess it is," he said, his voice rough. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He handed me the baby. Our hands brushed, and it felt like a bolt of lightning. For a moment I saw a flash of agony in his eyes, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. I climbed into the back of the wagon, my body feeling like it was made of lead. I was climbing into my own coffin. The driver cracked his whip, and the wagon lurched forward. I looked back. Clint was still standing there, a lonely silhouette against the vast, empty prairie. Elsie was now openly weeping, her small face streaked with tears and dirt. He let me go. He just let me go. What I couldn't see, what I couldn't possibly know, was that with every turn of those wagon wheels, Clint Maddox's heart was breaking into 1,000 pieces. He thought he was doing the right thing. He was an honorable man, and the deal was done. He believed I was going back to a better life, a life I deserved, away from the hardship and ghosts of his homestead. He thought he was setting me free. He had no idea he was destroying himself. After the wagon disappeared over the rise, he went back inside the cabin. The silence was deafening. The place already felt empty, dead. My scent lingered in the air, a sweet, painful reminder of what he had just lost. He sat at the kitchen table, his head in his hands, a broken man in a broken home. "I let her go, Sarah," he whispered to the empty room, "and I'll be damned if I know why." Elsie came in, her eyes red and swollen. "Pa," she said in a tiny voice, "why'd you let her leave? I thought she was our new ma." "It was the deal, little one," he said, his voice choked. "It was the deal." Just then, a fierce gust of wind rattled the cabin door, blowing it open. It swirled a few stray leaves and a piece of paper across the floor, where it came to rest against Clint's boot. He glanced down, annoyed, ready to toss it into the fire. It was crumpled and stained with mud, but something made him pause. He picked it up, he unfolded it, and he began to read. "My dearest Clint." It was my letter, the lost letter. The wind, the same cruel wind that had stolen it, had brought it back. It had delivered my heart right to his feet. He read every word, his eyes scanning the page frantically. "I've fallen in love with you. I don't want to leave. Please, ask me to stay." The truth hit him like a physical blow. She hadn't wanted to go. She loved him. She wanted this life. She wanted him. And he, in his stubborn, prideful grief, had pushed her away. He had mistaken her silence for a desire to leave, just as she had mistaken his. Two proud, broken people, too afraid to speak the truth. "Pa, what is it?" Elsie asked, seeing the look on his face. He looked up, his eyes wild with a sudden, desperate hope. "She loves us," he said, his voice cracking. "She didn't want to go." He stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. He ran to the door, then stopped. Baby James. He couldn't ride with the baby. He scooped up the infant, ran to his neighbor's house, and thrust the baby into a bewildered woman's arms. "Watch him for me. It's life or death." Before the neighbor could even respond, Clint was in his barn throwing a saddle on his fastest horse. He didn't even bother with a coat. He rode out of that yard like a man possessed, like the devil himself was on his heels. He had one thought, one purpose: catch that wagon train. He rode harder than he had ever ridden in his life. He pushed his horse to its limit, galloping across the prairie, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm of "Ruby, Ruby, Ruby." The wagon train had a head start. They were heading for Eagle's Gap, a narrow pass through the mountains. If they made it through the pass, he might never catch them. It was a race against the sun, a race against his own foolish pride. He saw them just as they were reaching the foothills, a long, slow-moving snake of canvas and wood. "Ruby!" he roared, his voice raw. "Ruby June Patterson!" He urged his horse alongside the last wagon, his eyes scanning for me. I heard my name, a faint shout on the wind. I thought I was imagining it, but then I heard it again, closer, louder. I peered out the back of the wagon, and I saw him. He was riding like a madman, his hair flying, his face a mask of pure desperation. "Clint? What is it? Is it the baby? Is Elsie all right?" I cried, my heart leaping into my throat. "They're fine," he shouted, trying to be heard over the rumble of the wheels. "But I'm not. I'm not fine at all." The wagon master, seeing the commotion, called for the train to halt. The wagons groaned to a stop. Clint leaped from his horse before it had even fully stopped. He ran to my wagon, his chest heaving. He held up a crumpled, mud-stained piece of paper. "I found it," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I found your letter." Tears sprang to my eyes. "You don't have to explain, Clint. A deal is a deal. I understand." "No," he said, his voice suddenly loud enough for the entire wagon train to hear. "No, you don't understand." He took a deep breath. "You rode off with my heart like a common thief, Ruby June. You came into my life for one season, and you burned down everything I thought I knew. You made my house a home again. You made my daughter laugh again." He stepped closer, his stormy eyes boring into mine. "I love you," he said, the words raw and torn from the deepest part of his soul. I love the way you burn the biscuits. I love the way you sing off-key to the baby. I love that you saw the good in my daughter when all she showed you was the bad. I love you, and I was too much of a coward and a fool to say it. I was so scared you were too good for this life. Too good for me. I scrambled down from the wagon, my legs unsteady. I reached up and touched his face, his skin rough from the wind. You beautiful, stubborn fool, I whispered. I was never too good for this life. With you, I was finally good enough for it. And then he kissed me. Right there, in front of God and the entire wagon train. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a desperate, hungry, life-affirming kiss. It was a promise. It was a prayer. It was a homecoming. When we finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. Come home, Ruby, he whispered. Be my wife. For real this time. For all the seasons to come. Yes, I breathed, laughing and crying at the same time. Yes, 1,000 times, yes. He lifted me onto his horse, settling me in front of him. He turned the horse around, and we rode away from the wagon train, away from Boston, away from the ghosts of the past. We rode home together as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and red, the color of a new beginning. Their story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the most broken ground is the most fertile place for love to grow. It wasn't a perfect start, but it was real, forged in the harsh realities of the frontier and tempered by the courage to survive the winter. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of survival, love, and the untamed human spirit. And let me know in the comments below. If you were Clint, would you have been brave enough to ask her to stay before she left? We'll see you in the next one.